Hi everybody, we're getting started just a couple minutes behind, but that's all right. We promise not to take all the time today, or we'll try not to unless you have a million questions, which is good, we love questions. So I want to start out by asking all of you a question, or a couple of questions. By a show of hands, how many of you have a really great idea for a product or an application or something like that? Yes, everybody does, right? Now, how many of you have struggled with figuring out how to take that idea, turn it into a viable product that the market wants, or have actually taken that idea to market but have struggled with getting the market to adopt it and pay for it and subscribe? All right, so what we're going to be doing today is we're actually going to be sharing the encaptiv story about how we took this idea and turned it into a viable product that got people to adopt it and want to sign up for it even before we rolled the product out to market. And so we're going to be doing that by sharing our story. And my name is Shannon. I'm the founder of encaptiv, and I'm joined here by Enmanuel, who's one of our engineers, who has been really crucial in helping to turn this vision into a reality. So before we get started, instead of telling you all about encaptiv and what it is, we figure it's better just to have you pull out your phones or your laptops or tablets or whatever web-enabled device you have and go to encaptiv.com. And when you get there, you'll see a bright pink Join Presentation button. You click that button and it'll ask you for your name. Put in your name, join the presentation, and it'll pull you in to be able to see our slides. And then when you're in there, you'll be able to do all kinds of cool things. You'll be able to ask questions that come directly to my device here. I'm actually running this from my device. We're not using PowerPoint or anything. We're using encaptiv to run this. And so you'll be able to ask me questions. You'll be able to take notes on the slides and give us feedback using the little emojis. Don't worry, it's anonymous. So if you want to say you're bored or confused, you won't hurt our feelings. We like the feedback. So feel free to play around with it, interact with us, and then what we'll do at the end when we come to the question and answer part of it all, we will be looking at your questions through the platform here and taking your questions there. If you're just walking in, you can go to encaptiv.com, join the presentation live, and follow along with us.
How did it know that I'm in this presentation?
Because right now you're using our MVP, which is our early stage, and there's only one instance of the presentation.
Oh.
So
I was like, this is pretty smart.
So, all right, so just a little quick overview of the agenda today. Like I said, we're going to be sharing our startup story with our goal of helping you to learn about building a product that's viable through our story. So we'll start from the idea and then how we built out a team to bring this vision to reality. And then from there we'll be talking about gaining viability, so making it a viable product people actually want to use, and then taking that and building momentum with all of that. Then I'm actually going to hand it over to Enmanuel because he'll do much better justice to explaining all the technical aspects of this, to talk about the product and some of the pivots we've had to make because we've made some decisions along the way where we've had to go, oh, not that way, let's go back this way, and that's that volatility part of it all. And then we'll let you know where we are today. So before we get started, just a quick little bit about us. As I said, my name is Shannon. I actually come from a sales and marketing background. I was a sales and marketing executive in corporate America for a long time. So I ran a lot of sales team, did a lot of training, same thing with marketing departments. And I also have a background in communication where I teach public speaking and communication. I've done that at the college level for a number of years. And I also have had when I left corporate America, I've had my own consulting business focused specifically on that for the past 5 years. And so over the years, I've seen a lot of issues with presentation software, which is what brought me into encaptiv. So now I'll let you meet Enmanuel.
Hello everyone, I'm Enmanuel Rivera. I'm a software engineer. I've been doing software development for quite a while now. I worked in the telecommunications industry, and most recently I've been working in the medical IT industry. And now working with Shannon on the entrepreneurial life of trying to get this project off the ground.
So why is all that important? Why does the background matter? Because being in an industry where presentations were very important and teaching people effective communication and presentation skills, it's led me to have a lot of issues with current presentation softwares that are out there. And now we have Google Slides and Slido and different things that have helped improve that. But there's still some holes in that, which we'll talk about as we start to get into the story of where the idea came from. But it really helped me to see things from multiple different facets, both in the corporate world, the entrepreneurial world, as well as in the educational world, and take all of that and apply that toward building up for this idea. So I had seen all these issues for a long time. How many of you love PowerPoint? I'm not going to say how many of you hate PowerPoint. Show of hands, how many of you love
I
PowerPoint?
mean, loves a strong word.
How many of you like PowerPoint?
It's what I'm used to, so yeah.
All right, so there's some great things about PowerPoint, but it lacks in some areas, especially with engagement and getting your audience involved in what you're doing. So I was working with one of my clients, and she had a big presentation coming up. She was going out to do a training session for a client. This was her first big opportunity for this client that she wanted to turn into a long-term client. And we had worked together on putting together a really solid deck for her, on practicing her presentation, on getting it down. And then the day before the presentation, I was actually down in Florida at this time visiting my family and get a call from her. And I will never forget this because I'm walking down the street in Ybor City. My sister and I are heading to lunch in Ybor City looking for a place to eat. And my phone rings. And I said, oh, hold on, I have to take this. This is my client. I know she has a big presentation tomorrow. So I pick up the phone and just immediately frantic, bombarding me with questions of what to do. First, it started with the hardware questions, right? Oh my gosh, what do I do? Do they have a projector or do I have to bring a projector? And what happens if it's theirs? How do I hook it up? What kind of cords do I need? Or do I bring it on a little drive and put it onto their computer? And will that work? How do I know if my PowerPoint's the same as their PowerPoint? And then she starts going on and on with all these different hardware questions with, what about a clicker? How do I advance the slides? Do I stand behind there and hit the space bar? Or do I use a clicker? Do I need to buy a clicker? Do they give me a clicker? I'm like, hold on. And so I started answering all of those questions, right? And then she started in, okay, now that I've got those under control, what about audience engagement? We got my whole presentation down, but I don't want to just sit up there and not have them be engaged. What are some ways I can get them engaged in this session? So we talked about that, and then inevitably, and I know we've all seen these, there's that one person in the room that just takes things off the rails, and you've got to figure out how to bring them back in. So she was asking, well, how do I bring them in if they get off the rails, and so on and so forth, and what about Q&A, and how do I handle that? And so more of this just bombardment of questions. Then the final set of questions I started to get were, well, this isn't a one-time presentation that I want to do. It's great that I landed this, but I want to turn them into a long-term customer. How do I know who in the room was engaged, what they were engaged with, so I know what to follow up with them on? When's the appropriate timing to follow up? How do I convert that into a sale or a next meeting, and so on and so forth? So there was all these questions here. So as I'm answering all these questions, I am giving her all these manual, human, workaround answers. And of course, there's certain technologies you can use for some of these things, but then you have to have 3, 4, 5, or 6 different technologies to do what should be able to be done by one technology, right? So I thought to myself, there's got to be something out there, or there's got to be a better way than all these manual workarounds and just all these usual human things that slow down the process, eat up productivity, and kill our time, the one thing we can never get back. So I started Googling, right? That's what we do, we Google. And so I found a solution that did 2 things over here, and 3 things over here, and 1 or 2 things here, but nothing that did really everything that I, as a presenter and someone that have worked and lived in this space for a long time, would need or wanted to do. So a day or 2 later, I got home from Florida, came back to Connecticut, sat down on my computer and said, if I were to build the perfect presentation software, what would it look like? And I'm not a designer, as you can tell by these drawings. But I sat down and just started drawing it all out and said, okay, this is what the presenter would look like, this is what the audience would look like, this is how they would interact, and started writing it all out. And then I printed this out, I made a whole bunch of copies, and I started going around and just showing this to people, including that client. So I showed it to clients, I showed it to friends, other entrepreneurs, random people that I ran into, and overwhelmingly the response that I got was, oh my gosh, when can I sign up for this? And I was like, no, you can't sign up for this. It's a drawing on a piece of paper. And so I was like, yeah, but when are you going to make it so I can actually sign up for it? And so I started to say, okay, maybe there's something to this. Maybe it has some legs. People are really interested in this. So I really need to discover what's going on here. So instead of just going out and building something, before I did, I had no clue what I was doing. First-time founder. I've been a business owner, but never a founder of something like this. So I found an advisor at the time who had helped start Priceline.com. So he knew a little bit about starting technology companies. And I started running the idea by him, and 20 minutes into the conversation, he's going, okay, when we build this, when we do this, and I said, does that mean this is a good idea? He's like, oh yeah. We're gonna make this happen. This is a great idea. We've got to flush out some things, but it's a great idea. And so he recommended that we slow down a little bit and get some feedback before we just start pushing forward. Unfortunately, this is where most people say, I've got a great idea. I shared my idea with people. They loved it. Let me go build it. The problem with that is you haven't tested it for viability, which we're going to get to in a few minutes. So in the early stages, when we had that idea, and it was a great idea, it was that advisor, who's no longer with us at this point in time, but that advisor, myself and my husband, Matt, who's sitting in the back of the room there. Everybody say hi. So it was just us, and we realized, okay, we need some technical expertise because neither of us have technical expertise, and we're building a tech product. So I had a friend that I knew was a software engineer, and so I didn't really know exactly what he did as a software engineer. I just knew he had like 20 years experience as a software engineer, or 15 I think it is. And so I reached out to him and started sharing the product with him. And he showed a lot of interest in the product, and we started talking more. We had multiple meetings and finally said, all right, we think this is a good match, but I need to run you by my advisor because I don't know anything about the technical expertise part. The advisor was like, yes, he's good to go, let's make this happen. So we brought Josh on, who's actually a graduate of Southern Connecticut State. Lisa was his favorite teacher.
Great graduate.
So he came onto the team, and he was going to be more of, not necessarily developing it, but the architecture, design, oversight of all of it, more of a CTO type role in this. And so we got that primary team together, and then it just so happened that I was out giving a workshop, because public speaking is what I do. I'm one of those weird people that loves doing it. And this guy here, Enmanuel, was in the audience. I was giving a talk on marketing and sales, and so at the end of the presentation, he came up to me, started talking to me, said thank you for the presentation, that he really enjoyed it, and we got to talking, and he told me he was a software engineer. And I was going, we need a software engineer. So we exchanged cards, and I was thinking, we might need him someday. But then I really had a good feeling about him. Again, not having any technical expertise, I had this good gut feeling about him and his capabilities, but I didn't just go. So we had a few meetings together, the two of us, and then I got Josh involved, and I got our CTO advisory person involved, and I said, you got to look at his resume and interview him. Is he the right person? So they did that, and they said, this guy's great. Yes, he's going to be perfect for us when we get going here. And so just before I continue on the story, I want to let you know we have built out more of a team since then, but that was the early people. Gino has more than a decade teaching at the college level, so he's working with the universities and all of our relationships with them. Alex is got product management experience working with Viability. And then Eric, who's got 25 years development experience himself, has started 6 companies, had a successful exit. He is now our advisor and is helping us out. But in those early days, it was just me, Matt, Josh, and that early advisor. And so we had lined it all up. We had the wireframes, people were loving it, they were asking when they could start using it. We had the team now, we found our tech expertise, this guy's gonna build it for us. Now it's time to go. No, we still need to test out the viability of this idea and make sure that it's not just a good idea that people are saying is a good idea, but it's a good idea that people will actually pay for, will actually subscribe to. And that's what led us into this whole viability study, which I'll share with you in a minute. But before we get there, that's why I asked this question in the beginning, because there's been so many people who have just taken that idea, run with it, and they end up being this guy down here, watering the little plant, wondering why the money tree's not growing, but I built this amazing application, everybody said they loved it, why aren't they coming? It's because they didn't test out the viability, the true market viability. Because a good idea without actual market viability that people will pay for is not a business. It's just a really good idea. So you have to make sure it's a good idea people will pay for it, and that's what gets you to be this guy. But Enmanuel has been very kind to volunteer to share a story about a time that he was this guy. So I'm going to hand it over to him.
Yeah, so I've been Sure. So I've been doing software development for a while, and that has been both in the corporate setting, but also trying to foster my own ideas. And a couple of years ago, I was participating in greenhouse agriculture, and we found a situation where we needed to take measurements of the environment, the amount of sunlight, the humidity, the temperature, the pH, right? And the way we did it is we took sensors and we stuck sensors in the ground, and the sensor says 12, and we wrote 12 down on a piece of paper. And we did that over and over and over again every day. And how many developers in the room? Show of hands really quick. So you guys are my people. Whenever we hear we do something over and over again, we write it on a piece of paper, immediately like something clicks, like, well, stop. We can write that. We can make that into a program, right? And that's what I did. I instead of using handheld sensors, we moved over to infect sensors, and then I had those hooked up into a system where they would take measurements over time on a schedule. We would take all those measurements, we put them in a database. Now that the measurements in the database, now we can do tracking over time, historical data lookups, we can do nice, pretty visualizations. In the future, I was even thinking about doing things like analytics on the data, and mention the data up to weather data, and then try to do like predictive stuff. All that was very cool. It had this one tiny little problem. I didn't ask farmers if they wanted this, right? We wanted it in the greenhouse that I was working on, because again, we were sticking the thing in the ground every day, and my back was kind of hurting from bending down 17 times, and I was kind of dumb. But it turns out that the other farmers didn't really care for taking the measurements of the environment. They should care, it's very important, but they didn't care. So what I was presenting to them was an expensive toy that let them do something that they didn't care for. So I built this really cool thing, but nobody wanted it, right? So in the end, it's the same thing. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, right? Does it really happen? If you build a product and no one uses it, then it's not really much of a point. And that's what Shannon's trying to help us understand.
Thanks, Enmanuel. Thanks for sharing that story. So the first thing we did then is we had already done kind of one round of initial market research, which was the wireframes, right? But we really needed to prove out the viability of it. So what we did is, I had never done prototyping before, but I was like, I'm going to learn Proto.io. So I learned how to build some prototypes in Proto.io, made them fun and clickable, and then we sat down and we did what we called focus interviews. Instead of focus groups, we did focus interviews because we wanted one-on-one, and we didn't want the group think to kind of take over and influence other people's opinions of the software. And so we had people from all backgrounds come in. We had professors come in, we had regular teachers come in, we had students come in, we had small business owners and entrepreneurs come in, we had sales professionals come in, we even had the ex-CFO of of HBO come in, as well as the standing senior vice president of product development for MasterCard International come in. So we had people from all over the spectrum come in and give us feedback. And what happened is, we overwhelmingly heard, wow, this is really cool, I want to use it, when can I sign up, let me know it's ready. So we were like, all right, we're winning, 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 we're on to a great thing here. But we did hear some little things that would help us tweak the product. We also started to understand who our target market was and who our target market wasn't. Who these features most appealed to and who would be most likely to use it versus who wouldn't. And so that helped us define and start to move forward. So you would think that at this point in time, all right, we've done 2 rounds of market research. We still are hearing, I want it, I want it, I want it, this looks great. Should we go ahead and build it? No. We took all that feedback, you can see some of it in the background there. We took all that feedback, chunked it out. We had a whole session where we took all of us, we recorded every single one of these focus interviews, just like they're recording us today, and we went back and individually watched them. We didn't watch them as a team. So all 4 of us watched them separately, and then came back with our notes, and we had a whiteboarding session, or a sticky note session, I should say, where we literally just wrote down all the things that we heard were good, all the things that we heard that might not be as popular, or all the questions or concerns people had, and we put them all over the walls, and we started to chunk them out and lay them out, and things that were outliers that maybe just one person said, we didn't discard, but we put them into the outlier pile, and said these are things to watch for if we start to hear these things over and over again. And then what we did is we said these things to improve upon, how can we tweak it, make it better, revise the prototype to see that we're really on the right track with this thing. And those things that people really liked were like, how can we bring these things to the forefront and really make them good? And so this was the second iteration of just the audience side of it, but the second iteration of the prototype. So then we did the same thing. We brought in another 30 or so people and went through this excruciating exercise of hour-long interviews, watching videos, going through sticky notes, all of that. So at that time, we've now been through 3 rounds of market research. Who thinks it's time to go to market? All right, I like it. You're right, it's not time to go to market, but we did need to go to the next level. So what we did is we took all that feedback and we built the MVP you're looking at today. Instead of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to build out the software, we spent $5,000 to build something that's working, that people can interact with, use, play, give presentations with, attend presentations with, and attend presentations with, and we took it to Tech Day in New York City, where there were going to be thousands of people, and we said, all right, this is really going to be major market research. How are people going to respond to this? Who's going to sign up to be a beta user? Who's going to get on track? And who likes it? Who doesn't? What feedback are we going to hear? And we heard a lot of really, really great feedback, and it really helped us narrow down even further and really pinpoint our target market. But it also did something else. It also helped us to understand how to market the product. Because when you do all these rounds of market research, people are telling you what they love, what they like, and they're saying it in their words. So as someone from a marketing background, anytime you can take people's own words and give them right back to them, you're much more likely to sell it. All of these rounds of market research also did something very important for us. It helped to build that early traction and momentum. Because now we've had people all along the way providing input into the product, seeing the revisions of that input and going, oh, they took my advice, they did this or they did that. Now they're invested in your product, they're excited about your product, they're telling other people about your product, and it's building that momentum and it's building that interest before you even have a product. I will tell you, we don't even have our product to market yet. We're moving it to production right now as we speak. There's people working on it while we're here. We're moving it to production right now as we speak. But we have a list of nearly 400 people at this point in time signed up to be users, and we don't even have a product yet. So that's how you start to build momentum. And we haven't done a bunch of marketing and gone out and done keywording and all of that. It's been this natural, organic way of building momentum. So that market research was one way to do it. Doing online marketing is great, but I think in today's digital world, we get so hung up on do Facebook ads, do SEO, do SEM, all this stuff. We haven't done any of that. And 400 may not sound like that big of a number, but for someone that hasn't really done much in the way of marketing, that's a big groundswell for just some organic, natural, grassroots stuff. So we've gone out, we've done networking events. We've been going out, and every time one of us presents, we use the MVP, and we present and we show it to people, and then they get excited and they want to use it. And they ask if we can come present elsewhere, if they can present with it. And so it creates this natural thing. And then on top of it, doing this networking and getting out there and meeting people and letting people get hands-on with your product will really build momentum, because they're not only buying the product that you're selling, they're buying you. They're just as invested in you and the vision that you're sharing with them and the excitement that you have about your product, your idea, the problem you're solving. So that's a really great way to start to build momentum. So I tell people, don't get so caught up in just the digital marketing aspects. Get out there, share it, talk to people, network, build relationships. That's going to be an important way to build that early momentum. All right, so you've been listening to me a lot. I'm about to hand it off to Enmanuel, and he's going to really be talking about the product. And one of the curses, blessings and curses of momentum is you have a lot of momentum, but then you have people constantly calling and emailing you. Is it ready yet? Can I use it yet? Is it ready yet? When can I start using it? Is it time yet? And so it puts a lot of pressure to get the product done and into people's hands and to meet timelines, which we know in tech, we never meet our deadlines. We're behind schedule, we'll admit it, and there were some things that led to that. But there's also an aspect in tech of speed to market. You have to get to market really quickly, because if you've got competitors in the space, you can't let them necessarily beat you there. And there's other ways to protect what you're doing, which we'll talk about a little later. But product was getting speed to market and getting it there was really big. And then, as Enmanuel tells the story, you're going to hear about some of our pivots that we made. We made last-minute changes to tech stack, or mid-development changes to our tech stack, one of which led us to this huge, oh my gosh, moment of we thought we were going to have to just stop everything, that the product was dead, that we were going to have to take all of the work we did, throw it away, and spend another 3 months reprogramming one of the most crucial aspects of our platform. And so that was like a big, so I'm going to let Enmanuel tell that story for you.
Thanks. So, as you know, we have a web app, and for those of us that are developers in the room, we know that web apps have this very simple dynamic. Client sends a request, the server sends back a response, right? And a lot of things we do are around that. However, for more dynamic applications, that doesn't work very well. So, for example, as you see, Shannon has been guiding this presentation with her phone, and she's the one that's initiating the communication and it's getting to your phone. Your phone didn't make a request, right? This is bi-directional real-time communication. And this just requires a different tech stack that you would normally use for just a normal web application. And when we built the MVP, which is what you're looking at right now, our primary goal was to get something up and running fast, right? We want people to be able to touch and feel the idea, not just explain it to them verbally. And what we chose to do was to use Firebase. Firebase let us do bi-directional communication. I see fans in the back of the room. Firebase let us build this communication very quickly so we can show it to people. And it was great, and you're looking at the result of it working right now, right? However, when we went from MVP to actually fleshing out our real product, we decided to go in a different direction. For a lot of reasons, right? We wanted to make sure that our architecture was neutral. We wanted to make sure it was flexible. And we wanted to make sure we can have the central aspect of the communication inside the application. So not use a third-party service for our communication, which is kind of one of the most important things of the application, or maybe the most important. We wanted to have that inside so we can integrate into it very tightly within the application. So then we decided, okay, so let's not use a third-party service, let's use WebSockets. WebSockets is a web standard, industry standard tool. It's really great, and one of the great things that it lets you do is that it lets you do bi-directional communication. So the server can talk to you without you necessarily talking to the server, right? We don't have to have the request-response dynamic. I can send you 17 messages, you can send me one, I can send you 3 more. We can just have a bi-directional channel communication going, right? And this was really good. While that was going on, in parallel, we had other members of the team working on the system, and they were building our infrastructure. And they decided, hey, we're going to host our application on App Engine. For a bunch of different reasons, but primarily because App Engine reduces operational complexity. We don't have to worry about a bunch of ops stuff. We put it up on App Engine, and for the most part, it kind of works, right? So these parallel tracks were going on, and everything was going fine. And then we kind of hit a speed bump. You see, WebSockets is great, but WebSockets needs a long-running server to be able to send messages back and forth. App Engine is great, but App Engine doesn't do long-running servers. App Engine will only let you, a request comes in, it replies to a response, your instance is brought up to satisfy that response, but then it goes back down. Nothing is running constantly. So now we have these two pieces of our tech, which are fundamentally at odds with each other, and we were kind of concerned as what was going to happen at that point, because would we have to go back to Firebase again? Would we have to find another piece of tech that would be compatible with App Engine? And in the end, what we decided to do was to have a hybrid model with our infrastructure, where we're going to have part of our system was going to work on App Engine, part of our system was going to work on computer, just like regular virtual machines, right? So we were going to have to take a little more operational complexity on ourselves. We were going to have to worry about system updates, and security, and patching, and us being responsible for having the uptime of those services. So a little more operational complexity there, but more flexibility. With that flexibility, now we can have long-running servers. And with these long-running servers, now we can have WebSockets up and running. So now this is great because we're going to have the same functionality that you're seeing here in this MVP, but we can integrate with this communication directly at the core of the application. And then we can integrate it directly with the other parts of the application. So we had a little bit of a scare there, but we were able to pivot the tech stack, and now the new tech stack is working pretty well, and we're looking forward to releasing it soon.
And don't forget, we're getting to the end here, so feel free to be submitting your questions here if you haven't already been, and we can answer those questions in just a few minutes. So I mentioned that there was more to the presentations than just the engagement part. When I was telling the story about my client that kind of gave me that aha moment, there was also that what happens after the presentation is over. And even the new presentation softwares and engagement platforms that have hit the market, they have, some of our competitors have this device-to-device communication, not necessarily all the rich, robust features we have, but similar features, and you can communicate back and forth. But what they're not doing is helping you go beyond that presentation. How do you take and utilize the data and analytics from what's happening in the room to let that presentation be really productive for you, whether it's getting people to sign up for an email newsletter or schedule an appointment with you or follow you on social media, or if you're a charity or trying to raise money for a charity, donate to your cause, whatever it may be, how do you get them to take that action? And a lot of times, studies have shown that when people are in the room, they're really excited to do that. And they're really excited to complete that. I can't tell you how many talks I've come to where I have my call to action at the end that says, schedule an appointment with me, it's free, you'll get a consultation, I'll teach you this, that, and the other. I'll be stuck there an hour after my 30-minute presentation answering questions and people saying, I'm going to book with you, I'm so excited. And so I get their information, their cards, and I reach out to them, and then I reach out to them, and then I reach out to them, and maybe 1% of them will actually follow through with that. And it's not because they're not excited to do that. It's because people walk out that door and life happens, right? So how do we get them when they're still in the room, still excited, and make it really super easy for them? And so this is our key differentiator, is that we're enabling presenters to convert their audience members or have their audience members complete those calls to action right on their devices before they leave the room. And so you should be seeing what that looks like now if you're still logged into the presentation from your device. This one is a simple version of what our email call to action will look like. You put in your email address, you hit submit, there's an API that goes to MailChimp, you're automatically in our MailChimp newsletter if you sign up and hit submit. It's that simple to get people to sign up for your newsletter. And in our use cases of doing this with the MVP, we've been seeing a 95% or higher conversion rate, which is really phenomenal compared, now that's with an email conversion, but that's really phenomenal compared to when people leave, though it's usually around a 1 or 2% conversion rate after they leave the room. This is the part that really differentiates us from our competition. This is the part we filed a provisional patent around. This is the part we're working on our non-provisionals on. And this part couldn't have come into being if I had just taken that initial idea that was those wireframes and jumped to it and went to developing it. It took doing the market research, and I was actually out giving a workshop similar to one that Enmanuel attended, had people lined up asking me questions, and I kept feeling that pain, and I kept hearing that from other people, and I said, this should be an important part of our platform. And it was that slowing down and that taking that time to do that market research and understand that that's really giving us the competitive edge, that's making people very interested in the product and making investors interested in investing in the product. So it's slowing down, taking the time, doing that research to prove out your viability, so you're not just taking a good idea and developing it and putting it out to the world. If you build it, they will come. You're actually taking an idea, testing the idea, retesting the idea, pivoting, retesting, putting it out there, getting the feedback, actually listening to what your market is saying, and executing on that. You don't have to take everything they say. You need to stay true to what your product is and its purpose. Sometimes you need a complete pivot. It just depends on what you're hearing. And listening to it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and letting that help to inform your decisions. That will not only help inform what the product becomes, it helps you prioritize your feature sets so you know which features to go with first. There's another feature here. There's tons of other features in this product coming in the future, but they got deprioritized because what we thought people would be most excited about was like, wait a minute, they're good with just, we don't need to build our own slide builder, they're good with just uploading their PowerPoint into here. All right, let's put that on hold and keep rolling with the engagement aspects of this platform. They're really interested in all the data and analytics that come from this. Great, let's focus on building out a robust set of data and analytics that people can use and really understand what content people are into, who's engaged, why they're engaged, and have a solid way to follow up and convert those people. And so being able to do that will really help you take a product from idea to viable, and in the process build that momentum so that you can launch. And then where we are today really, well, I'll just leave this here. Where we are today really is we're We thought we'd have it up and running today, but we're still using our MVP, obviously, snacks along the way,
My
moving into
fault.
production. Not your fault. Not your fault at all.
Because you're here spending time presenting.
Exactly.
Exactly.
I like that. I like that.
Exactly. But we have hit some snags. We are a little behind, but we're happy with where we are and what we're putting out there. That's the other thing. Don't just rush it out. Make sure you're happy with the product that you're putting out. You only get one chance to make a first impression. And so we're very, very close to putting that beta product out into the world. And it should be, I've been told, very soon, not to say timelines.
We're ready. It'll be ready tomorrow morning.
So it's always tomorrow morning. So it should be ready soon. And so we have a lot of people ready to be betas. And if you're interested, you can sign up and use it for free. So that's all we have. We'll go to questions now.
So yeah, we have several questions that have been submitted. So I encourage you in the room, if you have questions, please take advantage of the app. You should have a question mark icon. You can submit your question there, or we can just take your question verbally if you'd like.
Pick up the screen, the question mark icon went away.
Oh, that's fine, no problem. So I'll go through the questions that I have, and then I can take questions in the room.
Yep.
So the first question that we have is, are notes visible only to me? And this is a user that did not submit their name. So I can answer that one.
Mm-hmm.
The way we have the system working is that all the data is private to the user that enters their data. So as a presenter, when I make my presentation, I can put in notes in my slides as a reference for myself as I'm giving my presentation. Those notes are private to me, and no one in the audience is going to see those notes. Likewise, members of the audience, when you're viewing a presentation, you will have the ability to save notes for your own consumption, and the presenter cannot see that. And other people in the room also cannot see that. Those are private to you individually as well. Same thing with if you like something, love it, are bored or confused, our reactions, all of our bookmarks, all of our interactions, we will take that data and we will aggregate it up for the presenter, so the presenter will know, hey, in this presentation you got 17 likes, 32 loves, so they will see an aggregated data set, but they won't know that this user specifically didn't like you, right? So we're trying to keep the data as private as possible.
And then how that relates to the presenter is also on a presentation by presentation basis. For each instance you give that presentation, it saves the data for you, and you'll be able to see slide by slide those interactions, how many bookmarks you got on that slide, likes and loves you got on that slide, questions you got on that slide, bored and confused, so you know which content you're losing people on. Maybe on slide 15 you got 20 questions and 17 were basically the same thing. You know on slide 15 you need to be explaining something differently, right? So it really helps you understand the content. But also, as the presentation's going on, those calls to action, I forgot to mention something very important about those calls to action. As the audience members are interacting with you, it's calculating a unique engagement score for each and every audience member. So each of you will have your own engagement score. Some of you may be a 3 out of 10. Some of you will be a 9 or a 10 out of 10 based on how much engagement, different types of engagement or interactions you're taking with the platform. So that when I send out those calls to action, they're targeted to each one of you. So now you're not all getting the same call to action. You're getting calls to action based on your level of engagement. And then as the presenter, after the presentation's over, I can log in and see John Smith had an engagement level of 7.2. Mary Smith had an engagement level of 4.1. And so now I know if I am going to be doing follow-up, I know who is engaged and who wasn't. Same thing with students in a classroom, right? Knowing their level of engagement, who's paying attention in class, who's engaged, versus who's sitting back and doing other things. So I can really start as an instructor to know that, as well as where students are confused or needing additional help, and that will really help me as well. So the data may be coming in anonymously, but questions are coming through with their name, but it's still very useful data in the way that you can slice and dice it and utilize it.
Okay, so our next question comes from Niles. So Niles, can you raise your hand so I know who I'm talking? Thank you very much. So is there a situation when you would say focus groups are preferable to focus interviews?
Yeah, so they both have their value and both have their place. And so we specifically chose to do focus interviews in this case because we didn't want that group think. We didn't want anybody else swaying other people, but that can also be valuable at times because it can bring out things that other people don't think of when someone else mentions it. And it can get the group going on something. And if they start going on something and everybody starts chiming in on that, you can really start to see, okay, now we've got multiple people saying the same thing, and they start to bring out new ideas for that too. And so when we roll out the beta product, we'll be doing focus groups as well as one-on-one phone interviews and online surveys and all that throughout our entire beta period, because that data is very valuable. It starts to almost become not only a feedback session, but some level of brainstorming too. And you can get out of that things like, if someone says, well, what if it did this? Have you thought about using it this way? I'm using it this way. And then someone else says, that's a really great idea. I never thought about using it that way, but I would love to use it that way. We start to learn about new ways that people are using the product. And we can really start to use that A for marketing, or B for ways to build out new features or enhance features, things like that.
So we got a really, really great question from Nadine. How do you protect your IP during this process?
All right, so don't put something out to the world, especially if it's really unique, unless you've protected it in some way. So what we did, we got asked, we actually debuted this MVP at a TEDx talk. We got asked by someone that was in one of our focus groups, hey, I have a TED Talk coming up. Can I use this for that? And so we said, I don't know. First of all, it was a big challenge because we had to build it in 3.5 weeks and test it and have it in his hands. But second of all, we were worried about putting this out to the world, because if you put something out to the world, the first time you put it out to the world, you have 1 year to try to protect it from an IP standpoint. And if you don't file a patent by that point in time, you lose your rights to it. So first of all, be careful if you do think something is patentable or protectable that you do that. So what we did is we filed a provisional patent, which doesn't really protect you, but it does. It gives you first rights to that idea. And so that way we put the provisional patent out in the world. We filed that with the patent office. That way, if one of our competitors did come in and say, look at what they're doing, let's steal that and do it, and they tried to file and patent that, we have first rights to that. But that first right doesn't mean anything unless we file a non-provisional patent within 1 year of filing that provisional patent. And you can keep filing provisionals to try to extend that, but you reset your date every time you file a provisional. So we have to get our non-provisional in by March 23rd in order to really secure our rights to this. And then there's the whole uphill battle of the patent office and them not liking to patent software, and even business processes become complex. And so you've got to have a really good team of lawyers that know what they're doing, especially in the software space, to try to protect you.
Okay, so we have a question from Ming. How do you keep your potential clients engaged while they wait for a final product?
So there's lots of ways to keep your potential clients engaged, and one is to continue conversations with them. You can do that email marketing. So getting out there, getting out there and just sending them regular updates, which I will admit the last couple months I have not been as on top of that as I should be, because we've been just running like crazy people. But sending out regular emails, it doesn't even have to be that often, once a month, twice a month, just continuing to have touch points with them. There's certain people that are more invested people that I will just personally call or email or schedule lunches or coffees or whatever with. If there's distance involved, you can call them, you can do FaceTimes and Skypes and stuff like that. So there's some big potential customers that aren't here, they're elsewhere. And one's a major university down in Florida, and I've flown down there twice now. Even though it's not ready, I've flown down there twice, met with them, demoed it, just make sure we're top of mind, stop in, saying hello. And other ones that done regular phone calls with or things like that. So making sure you're having regular touch points. And then as little things happen, like every time we win an award, or every time a new competition comes up, or every time we hit a new milestone, I make an announcement to people. I do it across social media, I do it on the email marketing, all of that, and that continues. If you're showing excitement in what you're doing, that continues to create excitement for the people that are waiting for it. Even if you're late, they start to go, okay, they're still moving, they're still doing something. So.
Okay, we have an anonymous user that asked if he or she can make a suggestion. They'd like to suggest a comment function versus just a question.
Yes. So, so that was an anonymous person. So, as far as a comment function, the original images actually had a comment function in them. Do you have them in your question?
No, but that's not sharing.
Oh, that's right,
That's
it's
not
not
sharing
sharing.
the screen.
Only I'm sharing.
Yep.
So actually it should be, hold on a second. The original, let me go here, prototype. Yeah, it's sharing. So this original one actually had a comment function in it. Ta-da! And because I was thinking people are going to want to send feedback and comments to the user. And what we heard over and over is, I'm not likely to type you a comment. I'm more likely to just, that's where we went to the like, love, bored, confused, because the market research kept telling us, I'm not going to stop and type a comment in. I'm not going to stop and type a comment in. But we still do hear from people, but what if I want to send you a comment? So it's still one of those features that's kind of being flushed out right now, but the early stages of market research, we overwhelmingly heard that I'd rather do something simpler. I want to listen to your presentation, just give you quick feedback, which is where we went to the emoji set over the comment box. Doesn't mean it won't come back at some point in time, but it was there originally.
And I actually feel like, just as I'm thinking through how I would use it, you could always write yourself a note for that slide, and then later, if it's still a comment, you could pose it as a question.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Lisa asked, did you hire to get your product developed? Did you hire out to get your product developed? And if so, how did you go about it?
Yes, so we have a third-party team that's working with us, and they're partially local, partially overseas, Italy, overseas. And when we first went about it, I actually met the team at a luncheon, at an entrepreneur luncheon, and got to talking to them, did a couple interviews, we tested this team out by, well, before we went with this team, we had several other teams that we interviewed and talked to and stuff like that. And then based on the tech stack that we were wanting to use and the architecture and our timeline and all of that, that informed our decision for who we were going to hire. And then really put them to test with this really quick MVP, right? And they turned it around in 3.5 weeks, and it was working fantastic. It still is working fantastic. We've been presenting with it since March. And so, but then that didn't mean we're automatically going to stay with them for full product development. We still went through and we got 7 other quotes in addition to their quote. We talked to the different teams, we reviewed the tech stacks, we reviewed the timelines. Speed to market was really important to us, as was the technology that this was going to be built on. And so that really informed our decision. Price was somewhat of a factor, but we actually ended up going with the more expensive option because of the speed and the tech stack and the flexibility of being partially local as well, especially the UI UX aspect of it, being able to do that in person and do designs together and review all that stuff became really important. So there were a lot of factors that played into choosing which team it was.
Okay. Niles asked, will the viewers be able to save the slides before or after the presentation? I can answer that one, right?
Yeah, sure.
So what happens is, every time you participate in a presentation, it'll be saved in the system that you participated in that presentation. So you can always go back to your history and see all the presentations that you participated in, and you will be able to replay that presentation offline whenever you want. You'll be able to review your notes, the slides that you liked, any bookmarks that you placed in it, or any kind of interactions. You'll be able to go back and review those, as well as the presentation content itself.
Which is huge, because nowadays when you go to conferences, it's like, you're super excited, you saw something that you really like, and then it takes like, usually they're like, oh yeah, we'll have it up in 2 days, and it's like 2 weeks later, and it's still been posted.
Or think about, you saw an interesting slide, let me take my phone, let me take a picture of that slide, right?
Now you can just screenshot it.
Not even that, bookmark it. There's a bookmarking function.
Yeah.
You can just bookmark an interesting slide, you can go back later and just pull up your bookmarks.
Yeah, you can just sort out the slides and say, oh, this is the presentation I sent in, just show me bookmarked. And all of your notes save with the slides they were initiated on. So if you're taking notes on slide 2, and we move to slide 3, and you save that note, and then you start taking new notes on slide 3, when you go back and look at it, and you go to slide 2, your slide 2 related notes are there.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, so that was the next question, so I imagine you're Lisa.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, so Lisa asked, commented, I was adding a note and you changed slides, so my note was added to the subsequent slide. So you are correct, that is a problem on the MVP, but it is something that does work correctly on the actual product that we'll be launching soon.
And so unfortunately we're out of time. Thank you for all the really great questions. Hopefully you learned a lot from this, and I know me hearing other founders' stories has really helped me to understand process and things that I should do and not do, and made plenty of mistakes along the way, and will continue to make them as part of the process. But if you have a great idea, get out there, test it. If you have any other questions, we'll be here to answer them for you.
Yeah, and I will be outside after the presentation, so if there's any questions of any kind, if you want to approach me, I'm more than happy to talk to anyone.
Thank you, everybody.